Sickness and illness really is a path to self-love. And that within every traumatic experience, whatever that trauma is, whether it's a sudden, like what we call a capital T trauma, or whether it's just been like a stressful situation that you've been dealing with for a long time, every trauma contains within it some blessing, some gift, and some lesson. There's nothing to feel guilty about or ashamed of. All of it ultimately points to love.
Welcome to today's episode of the Eat, Live, Feel Better podcast, where I sat down with Marcella Friel, a food and forgiveness mentor who helps health-conscious women learn to love and forgive themselves. Today's topic is how to forgive yourself when you're sick. At first blush, you might actually wonder why forgiveness might be necessary at all. Why do I need to forgive, you might ask? Well, when you listen to this podcast, you will understand that underneath every single negative and unwanted behavior, thinking pattern, or painful symptom, there's a story just waiting to be uncovered. Stories are stories we tell ourselves in the moment about what is happening, and stories often originate in childhood. There's a problem with childhood stories, though, and that is that they rarely accurately represent what actually happened. And this is because we lack emotional intelligence as little kids. So we literally make up stories about how we're unloved, how we're unworthy, and how we don't deserve the attention of our parents, etc. Now, unfortunately, we carry these stories around with us our entire lives sometimes, until one day we're confronted with a failure or the inability to achieve something we really want, such as losing weight, for example. It's at this point that you muster up the courage to ask yourself why you can't achieve your health goals. And that's where Marcella's work comes in. Her grand message of forgiveness says that whatever it is that's blocking you from achieving your goals can be released through forgiveness. Hallelujah! That is so powerful. If you're wondering how all of this is accomplished, Marcella's got a special method of working with women that you might have heard of. It's tapping, and everyone can do it. So grab a tea, get cozy, and let's work on self-forgiveness with Marcella. So hi, everyone, and welcome to the Live, Eat, Feel Better podcast. I am here with the beautiful Marcella Friel, a food and forgiveness mentor for health-conscious women. And we are going to have a discussion today about how to forgive yourself when you're sick and the many, many dimensions of that. And I think you guys are going to love this. So welcome to you, Marcella. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for having me here. It's always, always lovely to see you.
Thank you so much. I think the feeling is mutual. Food and forgiveness mentor. This is not a word or a phrase that we hear every day. I would love to hear how you came to have this expertise.
Yeah, it's a big question. Well, gosh, let's see. So my background since 1998, for about 20 years, from 1998 to about 20, well, actually a little more like 25 years, I was a chef and I was a culinary arts instructor. I taught at a little holistic culinary arts school in the wine country in Sonoma County, California. And I was a chef, and around 2013, I was working as a chef in a treatment facility for women recovering from love addiction. And I was teaching culinary school, and I loved my work. I loved it. And I felt like at the same time, I felt like I needed some kind of like a depth charge. Like there was a deeper level of work that wanted to come out of me. And I had been doing EFT tapping. I was working with a practitioner. She was really amazing. And tapping just brought huge benefit in my life. And around that time, I thought, well, gee, why don't I just become a tapping practitioner? And since I'm a chef, I'll use tapping to help people figure out what to eat. It seems simple enough, but I really, truly had no idea what I was getting into. So I certified as a practitioner. And then in 2014, I hung my shingle. Women started coming to me. We were hardly talking about food at all. We would talk about food for maybe a couple minutes.
Hmm.
And then we would get into stories about like childhood abuse or bullying or, just you name it.
Yes.
And there was one time I was working with a client and she said, some women use razor blades, I use food. And it was almost like a flash. I saw this phrase, women, food, and forgiveness. It was like an airplane was
Oh,
pulling a banner. It just
cool.
like kind of ran across my mind. And I realized that the struggles that women have with food it's not that they're not about the food, but by the time you get to this question of like, okay, what are you eating and how are you eating? You're already at the caboose of the train.
Hmm.
Oh, and I'm sure you know this from your work, Andrea. You start to get in, oh yeah, okay. So you start to get into like the nitty-gritty of that. And it's like, well, gee, my mother was always dieting and she would always tell me how fat I was. And I look at pictures when I was a kid and I wasn't fat. So there's this underlying trauma that sort of expresses itself in the relationship with food. And I have never dieted a day in my life.
Hmm.
I've never been overweight a day in well, actually, it's not true. I was a little overweight once, but it wasn't a big deal. However, I did experience multiple complex trauma as a kid, and the tapping was enormously helpful for me personally.
Hmm.
So suddenly here I was working with all these really deep traumatic issues. And in 2018, after the success of a couple of my courses on Daily Om, women were coming to me from all over the world, like, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. And it was like, oh, okay, I don't know. So I grabbed one of our colleagues who, Mary Sheila Ganella,
Yeah.
and she's a holistic nutritionist, and she's an Ayurveda practitioner. And I just grabbed her and said, okay, we got to start this thing. So we started the Women Food and Forgiveness Academy in 2018. And that's how I came to be a food and forgiveness mentor for health conscious women. That's the very, very abridged version.
And so you mentioned EFT. Not everybody watching might know what that means. Do you want to explain that a little bit and why it might be or is, I'm sure in your experience it is, but how that tool works to
Mhm.
get at forgiveness and processing of trauma. I mean, I'm so interested in this topic. It's why I wanted to speak with you because, yes, no matter what it is that we're trying to address or change when it comes to our health, uh, we're always coming up against roadblocks and obstacles that are internal. And we may know what they are, we may not know what they are. All we know is that we're having trouble making the changes we want to change. And so, any methodology that helps somebody to get deeper and resolve those issues, I feel we need to really understand and learn more about. So, how
Mhm.
does EFT work?
Well, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. It's also called tapping, and it's also called meridian tapping. It goes by a bunch of different names. And
Mhm.
essentially, what it is, it's a really remarkably simple self-help tool to help to decouple the memory of a traumatic experience or a stressful situation from its emotional charge.
Mm.
So emotional freedom, right? Emotions by their nature are emotion, they're energy in motion,
Okay.
right? You feel
Mhm.
angry, you feel happy, you feel panicked, you feel contented. These emotions come and go. They come and go, come and go. But sometimes when they hook on to a particular associative memory, they get lodged. And it's kind of like a log in a stream, right? It just keeps spinning. So why do I keep, getting in the same job with the same boss who reminds me of my father or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so what we do when we tap is we fingertip tap on points that are at or near the ends of certain acupuncture meridians while we're recollecting a stressful situation. And what the tapping does is it acts like a circuit breaker on
Mm.
the electromagnetic signal of the distress. So it pulls that circuit breaker.
Mhm.
And tapping is working with the midbrain, the limbic system of the brain, where like that's kind of like the smoke alarm system of our brain, stress alert, stress management. It can be remarkably effective and extremely fast sometimes at really diffusing things that we've been holding on to for years.
Wow.
Um, so, a lot of us when we're kind of trying to work out our traumas, we go to talk therapy. I was in talk therapy for years. It was wonderful, helpful, but I never really broke through until I started working at this deeper level in my consciousness, working at this sort of more subconscious level. The midbrain is older than language. And that's why we can talk about something and talk about it, but it never really cracks until we go back and we sort of open it up energetically and release it. So yeah,
So,
that's tapping in a nutshell.
okay, so we're accessing something at a deeper level. I think that's really key. So how do you access it? Like, how do you know it's there to access? And like, how do you know where to start? I guess.
Mhm.
Maybe that brings us to our topic of how to forgive yourself when you're sick, because I know we had another slightly different topic in mind, and then you actually got sick, and
I
then
got sick. Yeah.
inspired to share this. So tell us more.
Well, what I've observed and what I've experienced, what I've observed working with clients and what, my own experience, just getting really sick last week. It was a case of food poisoning, it turned out. So, you know how food poisoning can be. It can be intense and then it's gone. So that was very merciful. But during that time that I was kind of lying on my couch, feeling like I had 10 people stabbing me in the stomach,
Yeah.
extreme, extreme abdominal pain. I reflected on, of course, I was starting to blame myself about like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that. I think it was the culprit was, I hate to say it, but it was bangers and mash. Pub food.
Looks like there might still be some forgiveness to do.
Yeah, could be. Well, it's just a little embarrassing because I'm supposed to be this food person. It's like, okay, well, I was eating bangers and mash.
Okay, I think that that's perfect. We're all human, and nobody should think that a health coach is perfect. That's
Perfect,
dangerous
exactly.
territory. No,
Yeah.
we're all good.
But what happened was for me, I started to really tunnel down into like intense self-pity. I shouldn't have eaten that. I think that when we get sick, whether it's a kind of a passing sickness like this, or sometimes when it's a really chronic sickness, because those, chronic sicknesses can be a result of lifestyle choices that we didn't make and we know that we should have made them, but maybe we spent years neglecting our body and now here comes the bill, that the body's presenting the bill.
Right.
Or, maybe there was some kind of a medical mishap that happened. I trusted the medical professionals to tell me what I should have done, and it didn't feel right to me intuitively, but I followed what they said, and now here I have all these adverse reactions and consequences. We can give ourselves a hard time about these things. So where tapping comes in, the thing that's interesting about tapping is we don't have to rehash the whole story.
Okay.
So how do we work directly? We work directly, we go into like what's the body sensation here?
Mhm.
Oh, I regret that I neglected my body for decades. Okay, where do you feel that in your body? Well, gee, it's a sinking in my chest. Or maybe it's like a pit, like a sinking in the pit of my stomach. There might be a story connected to it, there might not, but we can work right directly with those body sensations.
Mm.
We can work directly with the emotions. The story comes much later, but there's that kind of primary experience. Like if we just start tapping right there, we can begin to unlock that stranglehold of guilt or shame or self-blame. And then often underneath that, what really is at the core, from the tapping world is beliefs, what we believe. So, segueing over, jumping over into Ayurveda for a second, working with, I mean, just looking at your work and also working with Mary Sheila, one of the things that really comes through in Ayurveda is the emotional roots of illness. The first instance is what would you call it? Like a disturbing thought, a cognition, something, a distortion of cognition. Then that brings an emotional charge. That sets off a whole, help me with this word, endocrinological, the
Yeah.
hormonal response. Thank you. And, then here come the hormones and they start shape shifting their way around the belief, the thought, the emotion.
Changing the chemistry in your blood, actually.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly. And then here comes the outpicturing of that with like a blood sugar imbalance or heart irregularities or digestive disturbances or thyroid malfunction or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you
Mhm.
know? So the thing that tapping is really great at is going right down straight into the boiler room of those beliefs. And the beliefs usually show up in the language of like a 0 to 6-year-old. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. I'm all alone. I can't do it. It's too hard, et cetera. Because it's in those first 6 years of life that we form, our perceptions of how we are and who we are relative to other people and relative to our world.
Mhm. Mhm.
So tapping can just, you can go right down and just clear them right out. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing, and I know it's amazing. I still feel like it's a bit of a mystery though. So I would love to like unpack that process. Like you say you could start with the physical sensation in the body.
Hmm.
Would you, I know tapping starts with like an even though statement, right? Even though I'm
Hmm.
feeling something. So would you say even though I'm feeling shooting pains in my abdomen,
You could certainly.
start there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's an interesting point. So if you have like chronic pain, or even a temporary pain, you can absolutely tap on the sensation of the pain. And what's recommended in tapping is to get really, really as specific as you can. So I have this shooting sensation in my stomach, just to the right of underneath my rib cage, right around my gallbladder,
Yeah.
you know, and it maybe my gallbladder feels congested, or maybe I'm just whatever. And describing the sensation, is it burning? Is it tingling? Is it stabbing? Is it throbbing? Is it, so even though I have this dull, aching, throbbing right underneath my right rib cage, I deeply love and accept myself. So that's the setup statement. With tapping for pain, you can actually put your hand, like say, on that spot
Mhm.
and just tap with the other hand.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's kind of like you're giving yourself Reiki. And then you just see how it is after that. What can often happen with physical pain is that it will migrate.
Yes.
So there's a technique in the tapping world, we call it chasing the pain. So it migrates over to the left side. Okay, so then we go over to the left side and we work on that. Okay, then it goes actually into my back. Okay, well, we work on the back.
That is so interesting. So, oh my gosh. So the very fact that it migrates suggests that it's not a physical symptom necessarily, but like you said, it's a feeling or belief at the root. Why would it migrate? What's the explanation? If you're chasing, is it wow, it's
Wind,
interesting.
I don't know, some kind of wind disturbance in the body. The winds
Oh,
are moving
maybe.
around, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, we do have airs in our bodies that facilitate movement. Okay, so if we start with like, even though I have this very specific pain, what is the next thing you say? Like, even though I have this pain, I deeply love and accept myself. But then, like, what do you actually say after
Hmm.
that?
Okay. So when you're tapping, you start with that setup statement, and then you might just focus on this pain, this stabbing pain. And what I do is I actually bring my awareness right into the middle of that pain.
Okay, I love this. By the way, I love this. Confronting the pain is powerful. Okay.
Mhm. So the pain becomes a meditation. So I'm tapping and I'm releasing while I'm tapping, and I'm actually taking this physical pain as a meditation.
You were just really digging into it.
Exactly. That's right. Because most of the time when we feel pain, we recoil back from it. We don't like pain. Nobody
Absolutely.
likes pain.
Mhm.
So it's a little counterintuitive, but you go right into the middle of it. And often what I will do, now this is me, this is not necessarily EFT orthodoxy, but I'll say like, okay, well, like if this pain could talk, what would it say? If this pain had language, what would it say? I'm hurt. Somebody pay attention to me. I need love. And there we are again, right with those beliefs, like right with that 0 to 6.
Gonna say we're 6 years old now.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
I had incredible low back pain for years. And when I did this tapping practice and I went into it, there was generations of trauma, generations of women raging about how limited they were in their capacity to move in society. you know. So it can be very, very revealing. This kind of tapping work, it's really helpful to do it with a practitioner. You can certainly do it on your own, but often, we can't see our own eyeball. And, like having somebody who can just reflect back to you and
Mhm.
hold a container for you,
Mhm.
yeah, that can be very helpful. So,
For sure. I mean, you have all the experience. And this is the thing about tapping is that I feel like a tapping practitioner like yourself must have incredible awareness of the way that feelings and emotions and sensations work
mhm.
in all of their, different colors and variations. And, there's all these interconnections. It's like, some level of mastery over sort of the human mind and emotions that, few of us even come close to understanding.
Hmm.
Because I'm sure you do that so many times with people you learn so much about how the inner world, how our inner worlds work. And that's the big mystery for most people. And
Mm.
so I would imagine working with an expert like yourself will be very powerful. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, Andrea. It sounds kind of like I don't know if I've got all that, but it's interesting because after a while it becomes kind of like reading the newspaper.
Yeah, I bet.
So like, if I hear somebody saying it's always like that, I think, oh, like my little beeper goes off, like, oh, there's a belief. Okay, belief alert. Oh, it never happens like that for me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, there's a belief.
And one question I had too is you listed off a number of beliefs at that 0 to 6 years old. And
Mhm.
what I'm curious about is if you sort of resolved the charge on that belief as it related to the shooting pain in your abdomen, for example,
Mhm.
right? Say it started with the shooting pain in your abdomen, but you actually discovered I'm not worthy underneath. And you tapped on that and you reduced the emotional charge. What I'm curious to know is there more than one story attached to I'm not worthy? Does it come
Sure.
up again and again for the same
Mhm.
person?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Because I mean, it's almost like we can do like a map, like put I'm not worthy at the center. And then it's like, okay, health and money and relationships
Ah,
and it can outpicture in all these different arenas of our lives. There is a little caveat here that I should say, which is that, tapping doesn't cure, but so like, will the tapping cure my pain? No, but what it can do is help to loosen up that emotional stronghold that facilitates, whatever other modalities you're going to use to heal that. But yeah, the core beliefs show up in everything. So when a woman comes to me and says, for example, I'm obsessing over every pound I gain. I get
mhm.
on the scale and I gain a pound and I freak out. I'm terrified of losing control of my body weight. Actually, I was just talking with somebody today about that. So then my question becomes, okay, well, where else is that fear of losing control showing up in your life besides with what, because the scale, again, by the time you're at the scale, you're at the end of the line.
Exactly.
And
By the time you're putting food into your mouth and you're unhappy about it, there's
yeah,
something behind it. Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So are you saying that it might be easier to understand where that belief is showing up in other parts of the life, or even more meaningful than trying to control what you eat as a way to control that? I'm guessing that's kind of what you're saying here.
well, it's like illumination, it's like you shine a light on it and then it comes out in relief. Because, in this culture, we struggle with food, we eat too much. What do? We go on a diet. And a diet, I mean, this, I know this, diets are like, oh my gosh, what a train wreck waiting to happen. I mean,
Yeah,
diets are so destructive to our metabolism, so destructive to our self-esteem, absolutely not the thing to do.
that is so interesting.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we know that diets don't work, but hearing it from you, it's coming out in sort of like full color because now you're setting yourself up to fail. You're setting yourself up to feel guilty when when you eat something you're not supposed to, you feel like a failure because you didn't actually lose weight. You're depriving yourself, you're suffering. You're not showing yourself love because you're depriving yourself. Like there's just, yeah, like a
You got
number
it.
of things emotionally in there is just like a minefield. You're right.
And you're trying to resolve the food at the level of the food.
Right, right.
So, often the question, and it's very interesting because even though we know diets don't work, there's still that obsession with dieting. And if
Yep.
I can only just find the right diet, if I can just dial in and get the right diet. Now, all of that said, and I know that making wise, self-loving food choices is essential to our healing. Like we're not saying go out and do whatever. Don't go out and eat bangers and mash. Don't do what I did. But what brings us to that point where we're so at war with our body, such that we're trying to like break it into this mold of dieting? What was the whole chain of cause and effect that brought you to that point? That's where I go. Let's go back. And then when we get a handle on that and you start to reclaim your self-esteem and your pieces of your soul start to come back in, okay, then let's talk about your blood sugar.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
let's talk about your morning habits. Then let's talk about, okay, how much water are you drinking in a day or whatever.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, self-awareness and the exercise of it is the fundamental thing that's necessary to really practice an Ayurvedic lifestyle. And it sounds like tapping can really help a person to develop that and work with that more, because I understand that the starting point is maybe just noticing that something's off or something isn't working
Yeah,
or something's hurting, right? Or, you're aware that there's a belief in the way, or you're wondering, why do I always do this self-destructive thing? You could start at
exactly.
any of those places. And then, like, when you say, what is the phrase? I deeply love and accept myself, even though this thing, I deeply love and accept myself. So, why is that important?
Well, because unconditional self-love is the antidote for everything that distresses us. That's the view. That's what Gary Craig, the man who, yeah, boom, mic drop, boom. That's what Gary Craig, the man who created the EFT technique, that was his.
Really, I never heard that before. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if you think about it, and this circles back around to forgiving ourselves when we're sick, because our bodies are so miraculous. They're
Hmm.
in- they're phenomenal. They're beyond comprehension in their elegance and the consciousness of the body. They're profound. So even being sick, it's the body's way of trying to bring the being back into balance. And within that sickness, within the sickness, there is a medicine. And what I love about Ayurveda is that the medicine is self-care. It's the science of self-care. It's the practice of self-care. It's all about self-care.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Nurturing and nourishing actions, I would
So
say.
you can have self-care, but if you don't have self-love,
Then
so
it's not going to work. I mean, the new habits are not going to stick. You're not going to feel compelled to do them. You're not going to be motivated. I talk about these actions being joyful, and they are. Like, if we can, I guess, if the self-love's there, it feels joyful. But if you're trying to force it, it's not going to feel joyful.
exactly. Or if you're doing it because Andrea says,
Don't do what I say.
right, it has to come from I love and value myself enough to. So I'll tell you a habit that I just started doing this past week is making a commitment to myself that I do not touch my phone or any media until after I have done my morning meditation. It's a game changer.
Why is it a game changer?
Well, because what I used to do is keep the phone by my bed, wake up in the morning, reach for the phone, look at my, look at my email, my texts, social media, la 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 la.
Nasty. Yeah, first
Yeah.
thing in the morning. Yeah,
The
that's
first, I'm putting junk media and toxicity, and then I would go meditate,
ah.
and then I would go meditate. And I like, why was I so depressed? Like, why? Okay, and this goes back to forgiving yourself when you're sick. Like, why was I just I never I was going through my days like just not feeling like I could get a leg up on my energy. And then I realized the first hour of the day is so sacred.
Mhm.
That beautiful, pristine interval of just waking up in the morning, there's an opportunity there to really create something new. And here I am just going into reaction to like the world and feeling depressed. No, I don't touch it until my tank is full. That's it. And it's been about a week now, and I can't even explain the transformation. It's so I highly recommend it.
I think
I,
there's going to be a lot of people watching this who are going to start that habit after hearing you share this. So thank you.
Good. I hope so. Because the other thing that I do once in a while, I call it technology Shabbat.
Uh,
I'll log off from Friday evening to Sunday morning
yeah.
and just give myself a whole 24 hours. Like if I'm going out, I just leave the phone at home.
Mm.
I actually leave it at home.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So that's a huge, in my opinion, in these days, in these times we're living in, that's a huge piece of healing. Coming, we are not appendages of our technology. It's really important to remember that.
And just, I mean, a simple thing, like I did it today. I was at the eye doctor's office and I was, please wait in a chair. Like, okay, so what's the first thing most people do? Pull out the phone. And I'm just like sitting there. I'm like,
Right. That's
checking in
right.
with myself, watching my breath, observing what's going on, and I did that for a while and I was like, okay, I'm still waiting. So I was like, I think I'm looking pretty weird here, just sitting here staring into space. Maybe I should pull out my phone.
But
But
isn't that great?
yeah, and I want to connect this somehow because I feel like we glossed over that very important, like the message in the sickness.
Yeah.
And is there a connection to self-love and connecting to self? Is it that first hour in the day? Is there, how can,
Well,
how do you go
the
Marcella?
first hour of the day, you're giving yourself the select portion of the day.
The best part of the day?
Exactly. You are giving to yourself the best part of the day. The best time to change your habits and change your outlook and renew yourself. So that's really beautiful. The hidden message, with the illness, it's interesting because in thinking about this topic, I was thinking about a friend of mine who I lost 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago. She was a sex worker, actually.
Mm.
And she had her third bout of cancer, and she had vaginal cancer. I had the deep privilege. She and I trained as tapping practitioners together, and I had the deep privilege of
Mm.
like being with her through her cancer journey and into her death. She would lie in bed, and this was kind of when, later stages. She was too weak to even like lift her hand up to tap. So there's a kind of a little secret tapping you can do. You just tap on your fingertips. And she would just lie there and say, can I love myself even with this? Can I love myself even with this? Can I love myself even with this? And she said to me, don't let anybody say that I battled cancer. I never battled this cancer. I loved this cancer. I loved every moment of it. It was mine. It was my body. I love my body. There was no battle here. Beating herself up for all the years of being a sex worker and, oh, I shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have, la, 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 la. And it was like, no, I
The,
enjoyed every moment of it. I mean, she was pretty amazing.
the connection was clear and obvious, and yet she still found a way. I mean, that forgiveness, right? Forgiveness and acceptance. I love and accept myself. Acceptance, right?
Exactly.
That piece is so powerful, just accepting what is. And that's part of having the courage to face it that we addressed at the beginning. and diving into the pain that we're experiencing, that other example
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
is
it takes a lot of courage. It takes
takes
a
a
lot of courage, a lot of willingness to have your identity fall apart and have a different experience.
yeah, another reason why it's important probably to work with an expert on some of these things, because that's really
Mm.
hard to do. It's
Yeah.
really hard on your own. But like, thank you so much for, taking us through this topic in such a, I don't know, a witty and light way. I mean,
Uh,
I love tapping because it's the whole methodology just feels so light. Like it's so innocuous. That's not the word. Like it's gentle.
mhm.
It's unassuming. That's the word I'm thinking of. It's like we're just tapping on energy and we're addressing things in the process. And in the process, it's basically lightening us up. It's releasing the heaviness of the blocked things and the emotions, and afterwards we feel lighter. I have one more question for you that I actually got from a student recently. I was teaching, we were talking about a powerful affirming I am statement of,
Mm,
right? I am healthy, I am healed, I am well, versus I want to be healthy or I will be healthy, right? I
yes.
am healthy. But that seems, that's great. That's great and all, but we have to feel it, right? We have to be able to actually feel I am healthy. And in tapping, we address the negative. And this was the
Okay.
question. Why do we go into the negative? Why can't we just skip all of that and just affirm the positive? This was the question.
Yep, it's the $64,000 question that everybody asks about tapping. So even Louise Hay, the grand doyenne of affirmations, she said, you cannot clean a room until you see the dirt. That's it.
Uh,
So there's a whole thing in tapping. There's a whole practice called working with your tail enders when you work with affirmations. So if you say, all right, I am healthy. And then this little voice comes up and says, no, you're not. What are you talking about? You're sick as a dog, you're not healthy. Then what you can do is tap on that. Affirmations by their nature, they're going to bring up that subconscious resistance. And then that's where tapping can come right in and just clear that. So that when you say I am healthy, you're basically giving that directive to your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind says, okay, got it. And we're gonna start to, like, okay, produce those white blood cells, and we're gonna start, building that immune system, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah,
But if you feel resistance to that statement, that's where you tap. You tap on
sure.
that. That's beautiful. That explains it perfectly. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to add that we didn't cover you feel is important?
I'll just say one last thing, which is, sickness and illness really is a path to self-love. And that within every traumatic experience, whatever that trauma is, whether it's a sudden, like what we call a capital T trauma, or whether it's just been like a stressful situation that you've been dealing with for a long time, every trauma contains within it some blessing, some gift, and some lesson. There's nothing to feel guilty about or ashamed of. All of it ultimately points to love.
And I love that.
I love it too.
Aw, and I love you. And I would love for you to share how people can get in touch with you.
Womenfoodandforgiveness.com. Womenfoodandforgiveness.com. I hold a live event every month on the second Saturday of the month. I call it the Undieters Club. It's free. Come join me. Second Saturday of the month. Just go to womenfoodandforgiveness.com, and yeah.
Great. And we'll include that information in the show notes when we publish this. So everybody just check down in the description and you'll be able to find links to get you directly there.
Great.
Marcella, thank you so much. This has been just an incredibly enlightening discussion, and you gave so many helpful tips I think that people can use as well. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye for now. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I encourage you to take action on what you learned. Press subscribe to get more information about how to eat, live, and feel better. And if you have some time, check out this episode that I picked out for you, which is the perfect follow up. Take care, and until next time.